Hello. Who's this?
Listen carefully. We have your son, and he is still breathing. I am sure you were smart enough to understand why I have called you. So if you don't cooperate with me, you won't see your son again. Kidnappers cut the call without saying anything more. Before we start the story, I request you all to comment below where are you watching from. So, let's continue. The silence of Alexander Vance's study was a cultivated thing, as expensive and precise as the Patek Philippe on his wrist. It was a silence that absorbed the gentle hum of the Mercedes Maybach idling in the circular driveway below, the distant, rhythmic crash of Atlantic waves against the Rhode Island cliffs, and the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of a $100,000 bespoke suit as he moved. Here, surrounded by first edition Hemingways and a Turner seascape that seemed to capture the very storm brewing in his gut, Alexander was the architect of his world, or he had been until 47 minutes ago. The phone on his mahogany desk, a landline with a number known only to a select few, had shattered that silence. The voice on the other end was not human. It was a flat, digitally scrubbed monotone, the product of a vocal modulator, each word dropping into the room like a lead weight. We have your son. His name is Leo. He is 14 years old. He was wearing a navy blue Saint Laurent sweater, dark jeans, and white Common Project sneakers. He was taken at 3:47 p.m. from the corner of Elm and Main, 1 block from the St. Ignatius Preparatory School. His bodyguard, Frank D'Angelo, is currently en route to Newport Hospital with a non-life-threatening gunshot wound to the shoulder. The clinical detail was more terrifying than any scream. It was an assertion of total control. They hadn't just taken a boy, they had dissected a moment, inventorying it with chilling accuracy. Alexander's knuckles, resting on the polished wood, were white. He could feel the eyes of his ancestors, frozen in oil paint on the opposite wall, judging his impotence. "Who is this?" he demanded, his own voice a strained whisper. "That is irrelevant," the voice replied. "You will be contacted in 12 hours with instructions. Do not contact the police. The integrity of our communication channel is being monitored. Any deviation will be considered a breach. The consequence will be the return of Leo in a manner you do not want." Wait. The line went dead. Alexander Vance had not become one of the most formidable venture capitalists on the eastern seaboard by panicking. He was a man who commodified risk, who thrived on pressure. But this was not a hostile takeover or a market correction. This was his son, the boy with his late wife's smile, the only truly priceless asset in a portfolio worth billions. He stood, his 6'3" frame feeling suddenly brittle, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The manicured lawn swept down to the sea, a panorama of earned tranquility. It was a lie now. The world outside was suddenly sharp, malevolent. Every shadow in the topiary could hide a watcher. Every glint of sun on the water felt like a sniper's scope. He thought of Leo that morning, sullen over his breakfast, earbuds in a world away. They'd argued, again, about his grades, his friends, his lack of interest in the Vance legacy. Alexander had delivered one of his speeches about responsibility, about the weight of the name. Leo had just stared out the same window his father now occupied, his expression a mask of teenage disdain. The last words Alexander had spoken to him were, "We'll continue this discussion when you get home." Now, the thought of that petty argument was a physical pain in his chest. What if those were the last words his son remembered him by? He couldn't obey. He couldn't just wait. The directive to not contact the police was not a rule. It was a trap designed to isolate him. But he was Alexander Vance. He didn't play by other people's rules. He picked up his encrypted cell phone, his thumb hovering over the contact simply labeled Crawford. John Crawford was not just his head of security. He was former CIA, a man who had navigated kidnappings in far more dangerous corners of the world than Newport, Rhode Island. He was also the only person Alexander trusted implicitly, but he hesitated. The integrity of our communication channel is being monitored. Was it a bluff? A standard threat to ensure compliance? Or were they truly watching his every move, listening to every call? The cost of a wrong calculation was unthinkable. With a curse that was half sob, he lowered the phone. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Vance felt true, paralyzing fear. He would have to wait. Special Agent Eva Rostova of the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the helicopter window. Below, The glittering necklace of lights that was the Boston coastline gave way to the darker, more sporadic glow of the Rhode Island shore. The thrum of the rotor blades was a familiar, comforting vibration, a sound that meant action, movement away from the bureaucratic quagmire of the field office. 5 minutes out, Eva, the pilot's voice crackled in her headset. She nodded, though he couldn't see her. Her mind was already assembling the pieces. The call had come in an hour ago, a top priority scramble, a high-profile kidnapping in Newport. The victim, Leo Vance, only son of billionaire Alexander Vance. The local police had been smart. They'd secured the scene but immediately kicked it upstairs, knowing they were out of their depth. Eva was the depth. At 38, she was one of the Bureau's top negotiators and tactical planners, a reputation built on a foundation of calm intellect and an almost preternatural ability to get inside the head of the subject. She had a PhD in clinical psychology from Johns Hopkins that she rarely mentioned, and a face that could shift from empathetic warmth to granite resolve in a heartbeat. Right now, it was set to granite. The helicopter began its descent toward the Vance estate, a vast illuminated compound that looked more like a museum than a home. As they circled, Eva saw the intricate patterns of the gardens, the shimmering swimming pool, the fleet of black vehicles clustered near the main entrance, a fortress of wealth, breached. They touched down on a designated helipad on the south lawn. Eva unbuckled, grabbed her go-bag, a heavy, reinforced case containing everything from comms equipment to a preloaded laptop, and ducked under the still-spinning rotors. A man in a dark suit, built like a refrigerator with a comms earpiece, met her, Crawford. She'd read his file on the flight over. Agent Rostova? John Crawford, this way. No pleasantries. She liked that. He led her through a side entrance, down a corridor lined with modern art that would have made a museum curator weep, and into a room that had clearly been converted into a command post. Banks of monitors were being set up by tech agents. Communication lines snaked across the priceless Persian rug. In the center of the storm, standing with his back to the room, staring into a fireplace cold and empty for the summer, was Alexander Vance. He turned as she entered. Eva was used to dealing with powerful people in crisis. They usually exhibited one of two extremes: volcanic, blustering rage, or a catatonic, shock-induced stillness. Alexander Vance was neither. His gaze was hyper-focused, intense. He looked like a man who had compressed his panic into a diamond-hard point of concentration. He assessed her in a single sweeping glance, and she felt the weight of that judgment. Mr. Vance, I'm Special Agent Eva Rostova, FBI. I'm the lead investigator on your son's case. They said not to call you, Vance said, his voice low and steady. They said they were monitoring. It's a standard threat, sir, almost always a bluff designed to maintain control. We have protocols for this. The first hours are critical. Are they? He asked, a flicker of anguish breaking through the control. Because the first 12 hours, according to them, are just for me to wait. They've already had 5. Eva placed her bag on a table, methodically popping the latches. Then we have 7 hours to get ahead of them. My team is the best in the world at this, but I need you to work with me. I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. She pulled out a recorder, but Vance shook his head sharply. No recordings. Not yet. I don't know what they can access. Eva nodded, putting the device away. Okay, then just talk. As Vance recounted the phone call, his words clipped and precise. Eva's team worked around them. A technical agent, a young woman named Chen with lightning-fast fingers, was already setting up a trace on the landline. Another agent was on the phone with Newport PD, coordinating the forensics from the abduction site. The detail about the bodyguard, Frank D'Angelo, Eva said when he finished. That's significant. They wanted you to know they were professional, that they weren't afraid to use violence, but also that they were measured. A shot to the shoulder is a message. It says, we can kill, but we chose not to. It establishes a perverse credibility. Vance absorbed this. What do they want? Money, Eva said. It's always money with a profile like this. But the 12-hour delay is unusual. Most kidnappers want to move fast, to capitalize on the shock. This pause, it's psychological. They're letting you stew. They're demonstrating their patience, their confidence. It suggests a high level of planning. I don't care about the money, Vance said, his voice cracking for the first time. I'll pay whatever they want. That's what they're counting on. Eva said gently but firmly. But paying a ransom doesn't guarantee Leo's safe return. In fact, statistically, it decreases the chances. It tells them they can win. Our goal is not to pay. Our goal is to find Leo and bring him home safely, and to put these people in a cage. Vance stared at her, and for a moment, she saw the raw, terrified father beneath the billionaire titan. Your statistics. That's my son's life you're talking about. I know that, sir, and I will treat it as if he were my own. But you hired me well. The government hired me to do a job. My job is to get him back alive, and the best way to do that is to control the situation, not let them control us. Just then, Agent Chen looked up from her monitor. Eva, we've got something. The round that hit the bodyguard, D'Angelo. Newport PD just recovered it from the sidewalk. It's a 9mm, full metal jacket. Common as dirt, but the casing, it's pristine. No fingerprints, but the firing pin impression is a perfect match for a batch of ammunition linked to 3 previous high-stakes kidnappings over the past 2 years. 1 in Texas, 1 in Colorado, 1 in Connecticut. All resolved with ransom payments. All unsolved. Eva felt a cold thrill, the hunter's instinct. A signature. They're a crew. Professional kidnappers. She turned to Vance. This is good news, Mr. Vance. Professionals are predictable. They have patterns. They want the money, not a martyr. They're less likely to be trigger-happy. The ones in Connecticut, Vance said quietly. The Mercer girl. Her father paid $16 million. She was found wandering in a park 2 days later, dehydrated but alive. Exactly, Eva said. They have a track record of delivering the merchandise. That's a pattern we can work with. But as she said it, a tiny alarm bell rang in the back of her mind. The Mercer kidnapping had been clean, almost elegant. This one felt different. The 12-hour wait, the clinical detailed phone call, it felt colder, more arrogant. As if these kidnappers weren't just professionals, they were artists, and this was their masterpiece. Leo Vance came to with a throbbing ache in his skull and the taste of blood in his mouth. The world was dark, swaying, and smelled of oil, gasoline, and stale hay. He was lying on his side on a rough, ridged metal surface, a car trunk. Panic, cold and immediate, seized him. He tried to scream, but a thick piece of duct tape was sealed over his mouth. His wrists were bound behind his back with plastic zip ties, the edges digging cruelly into his skin. He remembered, walking home from school. Frank, a few paces behind, on his phone. The black van pulling up. The side door sliding open. A man with a ski mask, impossibly fast. The sharp crack of a gunshot. Frank grunting, falling. A strong hand clamping over his mouth. Another grabbing his legs. The world going black. Tears of fear and frustration welled in his eyes. He was 14. He lived in a universe bounded by school, video games, and the oppressive weight of his father's expectations. He'd fantasized about running away, about escaping the gilded cage of his life. But this was not an escape. This was a nightmare. The vehicle bounced over a rough patch of road, jolting his injured head against the metal. He whimpered softly, the sound muffled by the tape. He thought of his father. The argument. The cold disappointment on Alexander Vance's face. Would he even pay to get him back? The thought was a new, deeper kind of terror. Maybe his father would see this as just another one of Leo's failures. He tried to calm his breathing, remembering a documentary he'd seen about Navy SEALs. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. It was hard, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He focused on the sounds. The hum of the tires. The groan of the suspension. They were on a highway, then they slowed, turning onto a rougher, quieter road. Gravel crunched under the tires. After what felt like an hour, but could have been 20 minutes, the vehicle slowed to a stop. The engine cut out. Silence, broken by the chirping of crickets. Then, voices, muffled, but close. Clean transfer. No tails. Get him inside. The clock is ticking. The trunk latch released with a loud thunk. Light, dim and orange from a single bulb flooded in. Leo squeezed his eyes shut against the glare. Rough hands grabbed him, hauling him out. He stumbled, his legs weak. 2 men, both wearing black balaclavas that revealed only their eyes, held him upright. They were big, muscular, moving with an economy of motion that was terrifying. They didn't speak to him. He was half dragged, half carried across a yard of overgrown weeds and into a dilapidated two-story farmhouse. The air inside was thick with dust and decay. They took him to a small room on the ground floor, a former pantry or laundry room with a heavy wooden door. One of the men produced a knife. Leo flinched, but the man simply sliced through the zip ties on his ankles. He shoved Leo inside the room and slammed the door shut. A deadbolt slid home with a sound of finality. The room was pitch black. Leo tore the duct tape from his mouth with a gasp, the pain a sharp relief. He rubbed his raw wrists, his eyes straining to see. A sliver of light came from under the door. As his vision adjusted, he could make out the shapes of empty shelves and, in the corner, a thin mattress on the floor with a bottle of water and a protein bar placed neatly on top. They were feeding him. They were keeping him alive. For now, he crawled to the mattress, his body trembling uncontrollably. He curled into a ball, the reality of his situation crashing down on him. He was a commodity, a thing to be traded. The bravado of the teenager, the resentment toward his father, evaporated, leaving only the raw, primal fear of a child. He was alone, in the dark, and the only people who knew where he was were the men who had put him here, back at the Vance estate. The command center was a hive of controlled activity. The 12-hour window was down to 3. The tension was a physical presence in the room, thick and suffocating. Eva Rostova stood before a large smartboard, covered with timelines, maps, and photos. Frank D'Angelo, the bodyguard, had been interviewed. His account was brief and humiliating. They were pros, knew what they were doing. Took me out first, neutralized the threat. The van was a late-model Ford Transit, no plates. They were gone in under 15 seconds. Traffic cameras in the area had been scoured. They found the van, but it had entered a blind spot near the industrial waterfront and vanished. It was as if it had been swallowed by the earth. "They've done this before," Eva said to her team. "They have a disposal plan for the vehicle, probably a chop shop, or they've switched plates and resprayed it already. We're not going to find the van." She turned to Vance, who was sitting in a leather armchair, sipping a glass of water. He hadn't slept. The circles under his eyes were dark smudges. "Mr. Vance, we need to prepare for the next contact. They'll likely call on a different line. A burner phone they'll have delivered, or they'll use an encrypted app. When they do, I need to be the one talking to them." Vance shook his head. "No, they asked for me. They'll expect me. Sir, with all due respect, you're not trained for this. You're a father. You're emotionally compromised. They will use that against you. They'll hear the fear in your voice, and they'll push harder, demand more." "They have my son," Vance snapped, his composure finally breaking. "They will hear the fear because it's real. If they think I've brought in the FBI, they might." "They already know," Eva said calmly. "They're not idiots. They know a man of your resources doesn't just sit and wait. They'll be expecting a response. What they won't be expecting is for us to be smarter. Let me be the calm, professional voice. Let me be the obstacle. You need to be the concerned father in the background, the one I have to convince to pay. It creates a dynamic we can control." Crawford, who had been silent by the door, spoke up. "She's right, Alex. It's what we drilled for in the protocol. You're the principal. I'm the security. She's the negotiator. We each have a role." Vance looked from one to the other, the isolation of his wealth never more apparent. He was used to being the ultimate authority, but here, in this nightmare, he was out of his element. He was forced to trust. He gave a curt, reluctant nod. "Good," Eva said. "Now, we need to establish proof of life. The first thing I will ask for is to speak to Leo, to confirm he's unharmed. They may resist. They may send a photo or a short video. We'll need to analyze it for metadata, background noise, anything that can give us a location." As if on cue, a tech agent called out, "Incoming!" Encrypted message to Mr. Vance's private cell. A collective breath was held. Eva moved to Vance's side. "Okay, let's see it. But don't respond. We need to trace it." Vance picked up his phone with a trembling hand. The message was a simple text from an unknown number. "Prepare for instructions. Stand by." 30 seconds later, the phone rang. Vance looked at Eva. She nodded, her own heart thudding. She put on a headset, connecting her to the recording and tracing equipment. She gave Vance a thumbs up. He took a deep breath and answered, putting the phone on speaker. "This is Alexander Vance." The same digitally altered voice filled the room. "Have you been a good father, Mr. Vance? Have you followed our instructions?" "I want to speak to my son," Vance said, his voice straining with the effort to sound firm. "All in good time. The price for Leo's safe return is $50 million. Untraceable cryptocurrency. Bitcoin. You have the means to acquire it." 50 million. It was an astronomical sum, yet for Vance it was accessible. Eva scribbled on a notepad. "Stall. Proof of life." 50 million is a lot of money, Vance said. "I need to know my son is alive. I need to speak to him." Now, there was a pause, a calculated silence, then a shuffling sound. A new voice, young, terrified, came on the line. "Dad?" It was Leo. The sound of his son's voice, cracked with fear, almost brought Vance to his knees. Eva quickly wrote another note. "Keep him talking. Ask a unique question." "Leo, are you okay? Are you hurt?" I'm okay. My head hurts. Dad, please." "Leo, listen to me. What did I give you for your birthday last week? Tell me exactly." It was a brilliant move, a question only Leo could answer, something that couldn't be coerced or faked. The watch. The vintage Rolex you said Grandpa gave you. You said it was time I had it." Leo's voice broke into a sob. "Dad, get me out of here." The line went dead, and the modulated voice returned. "Satisfied? You have 6 hours to assemble the funds. You will receive a digital wallet address. You will transfer the funds in one transaction. Once we have confirmed receipt, we will provide you with a location where you can collect your son. Any delay, any attempt to trace this call or involve the authorities, and the deal is off, permanently." The line went dead. The room erupted into activity. "Trace?" Eva barked. "Got it," Chen said. "Short, but we have a general location. Cell tower triangulation. It's coming from a rural area about 40 miles west of here, near the Connecticut border. A town called Foster's Glen." Eva rushed to the map. Foster's Glen was a speck on the map, a collection of farms and wooded hills. It was a perfect place to hide someone. "They're close," she said, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her. "They haven't taken him far. That's good. It means they're confident, maybe overconfident." She turned to Crawford. "I want satellite imagery of that entire area. I want to know every abandoned farm, every secluded property, and I want a hostage rescue team mobilized. Now." Vance was still staring at the phone, the echo of his son's voice haunting him. "You're not going to just pay them?" "We're going to make them think we are," Eva said, her eyes gleaming with strategic fire. "But while they're watching that digital wallet, waiting for their money, we're going to be finding their hideout. We're going to get Leo back the right way." For the first time, a flicker of hope ignited in Alexander Vance's eyes. He was no longer just a victim waiting for instructions. He was part of a plan. The hunter, not the hunted, was in the room. The next 4 hours were a blur of high-stakes coordination. The FBI's hostage rescue team, an elite unit akin to Delta Force, was wheels up from Quantico. Satellite and drone surveillance was focused on the Foster's Glen area, scanning for heat signatures, vehicle traffic, any sign of life in the remote properties. Eva Rostova was in her element, a conductor before an orchestra of technology and tactical might. She had arranged for the 50 million in Bitcoin to be assembled, a complex dance of moving funds between wallets to create the appearance of compliance, while ensuring the transaction could be frozen or reversed if necessary. Alexander Vance watched her, a grudging respect growing within him. She was relentless, her mind processing a dozen streams of information simultaneously. She debriefed him again and again on the short call with Leo, mining for details. "The background," she pressed. "When Leo was talking, did you hear anything? Anything at all? A creak? A bird? A distant sound?" Vance closed his eyes, replaying the moment. There was a hum, a low, constant electrical hum, like from an old refrigerator or a generator. Eva's eyes lit up. A generator. That means the property might be off-grid. That narrows it down. She relayed the information to the team analyzing the satellite data. Meanwhile, in the dark, airless room, Leo Vance was losing track of time. He had eaten the protein bar and drunk half the water. The fear had not subsided, but it had mutated into a dull, throbbing dread. He had heard the door open once, a masked man replacing his empty water bottle with a full one, never speaking, never meeting his eyes. It was the silence that was the worst. The utter isolation. He started to notice things. The floorboards creaked in a specific pattern when someone walked past his door. He heard a faucet drip somewhere in the house, a steady, maddening plink, plink, plink. And underneath it all, a low, vibrating hum. He pressed his ear to the wall. It was a generator, chugging away outside. It was the only thing that proved there was a world beyond his prison. He thought of his father's question about the watch. It had seemed so random at the time, but now he understood. It was a code, a way to prove he was really him. That meant his father was working with the police, the FBI. Hope, fragile as a soap bubble, began to form. They were coming for him. He had to be ready. He started exercising quietly, doing push-ups and sit-ups on the thin mattress. He needed to be strong, not a helpless victim, when the moment came. He rehearsed what he would do. If the door opened, if there was a distraction, he would run. He would not hesitate. The break came from the sky. A drone, flying a silent, nocturnal grid pattern, picked up a heat signature from an isolated farmhouse at the end of a long, overgrown driveway. The property was listed as abandoned in the county records. But the thermal imaging showed 3 human heat sources inside. One was stationary, in a small room on the ground floor. The other 2 were moving through the house. Furthermore, the drone's sensitive audio equipment, filtering out the ambient noise of the night, picked up the distinct sound of a gasoline-powered generator. "This is it," Eva said, staring at the live feed on the monitor. The farmhouse was a perfect stronghold, secluded with a clear line of sight down the single-access road. "Heart Ita?" 10 minutes, Crawford replied. He was now in full tactical gear, a stark contrast to his earlier suit. He would be liaising directly with the assault team. Eva turned to Vance. "This is the most dangerous part. When HRT moves in, it will be fast and violent. Our priority is Leo's safety. The teams are trained to isolate and secure the hostage before engaging the kidnappers. But there are always risks." Vance nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Do what you have to do. Just get my son out of there." Eva picked up a secure radio link to the HRT command vehicle, which was staging a few miles from the farmhouse. "Command, this is Rostova. We have a confirmed high-probability location. 3 hostiles, 1 hostage. Hostile positions are approximate based on thermal. Hostage is ground floor, east corner room. You are cleared to execute the breach on my mark." The voice that came back was calm, professional. "Copy that, Control. Team is in position, awaiting your go." The command center fell into a hushed silence. All eyes were on the drone feed, which showed a bird's-eye view of the darkened farmhouse. On another monitor, helmet cam footage from the HRT team leaders flickered to life. They were shadows moving through the woods, surrounding the property with lethal precision. Eva took a deep breath. This was the moment. The culmination of hours of analysis, negotiation, and fear. The transition from intellect to force. She keyed the mic. "All teams, stand by. Execute, execute, execute." In his dark room, Leo heard it first. A faint, almost imperceptible rustle outside, like leaves stirred by the wind. But there was no wind. He sat up, his heart leaping into his throat. Then came other sounds. Soft, scuffing footsteps on the porch. The gentle click of metal on metal. The 2 kidnappers in the main room heard it too. The one called Jax, who was cleaning his pistol, froze. The other, Dex, was peering out a crack in the boarded-up window. "What was that?" Jax whispered. "Nothing. A raccoon," Dex replied, but his voice was tense. Then all hell broke loose. There was a deafening explosion as the front and back doors were blown simultaneously off their hinges. Bright, blinding lights flooded the house. Voices roared through the chaos. "FB, get on the ground. Get on the ground now." Leo threw himself flat on the mattress, his hands over his head. He heard shouts, the percussive bang of flashbang grenades, and then the staccato rip of automatic gunfire. Jax, caught by surprise, swung his pistol toward the front door and was immediately cut down by a precise 3-round burst from an HRT operator. He crumpled to the floor without a sound. Dex was faster. He fired a wild burst from his assault rifle toward the back door, forcing the entering team to take cover, and then sprinted for the hallway directly toward Leo's room. His orders were clear. If compromised, the asset was to be terminated. He wasn't getting out, but he wasn't going to leave the prize alive. He slammed against Leo's door, fumbling with the deadbolt. Inside, Leo heard the bolt slide. Terror seized him. This was it. He scrambled to the farthest corner, his eyes wide, searching for a weapon, anything. There was nothing. The door flew open. Dex stood silhouetted in the doorway, his rifle raised. Leo saw the man's eyes, cold and merciless, over the sights of the gun. Time seemed to slow. Leo braced for the impact. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling above the doorway. An HRT operator, who had entered through a vent in the roof, dropped down behind Dex. In one fluid motion, he wrapped an arm around the man's neck, applying a chokehold, while his other hand forced the rifle barrel toward the ceiling. Dex gagged, his finger tightening on the trigger, spraying bullets into the roof. The operator held firm, squeezing until the kidnapper went limp. The operator kicked the rifle away and knelt beside Leo, his voice calm and reassuring through his helmet's modulator. Leo Vance. My name is Mike. I'm with the FBI. You're safe now. The bad guys can't hurt you. Can you stand? Leo could only nod, tears of relief streaming down his face. The operator helped him to his feet and guided him out of the room, shielding his eyes from the carnage in the main area. Other operators were securing the scene, checking the downed kidnapper. Outside, in the cool night air, a blanket was wrapped around Leo's shoulders. He was placed in the back of an armored vehicle, a medic checking him over. He was shivering, but he was alive. In the command center, the radio crackled. Control, this is Team Leader. Scene is secure. 2 hostiles neutralized. The package is safe. Repeat, the package is safe and unharmed. A cheer erupted in the room. Tech agents high-fived each other. Eva Rostova let out a long, slow breath, the tension draining from her shoulders. She turned to Alexander Vance. He was weeping, silent tears cutting tracks through the grime and exhaustion on his face. He looked at Eva, and, for a moment, he was just a father, stripped of all his power and wealth. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Eva placed a hand on his arm. "We're going to take you to him." The reunion took place at a makeshift staging area a mile from the farmhouse. Leo was sitting in the back of an ambulance, a thermal blanket around his shoulders, when a black Suburban screeched to a halt. Alexander Vance practically fell out of the vehicle before it had fully stopped. He ran to the ambulance and stopped a few feet short, as if afraid the image of his son would shatter. Leo looked up, his face pale and smudged with dirt, but his eyes clear. "Dad!" That single word broke the dam. Alexander rushed forward and enveloped his son in a crushing embrace, his body shaking with sobs. He held him as if he would never let go, murmuring over and over, "I'm sorry, Leo. I'm so sorry. I love you. I love you so much." Leo clung to him, the brave facade crumbling. He was a boy again, safe in his father's arms. Eva Rostova watched from a distance, a small, weary smile on her face. This was the part they never showed in the movies. The quiet aftermath. The human cost. The case was far from over. There would be debriefs, investigations, a mountain of paperwork, and the psychological fallout for both Vance and his son. But for now, the mission was accomplished. 2 weeks later, Eva was in her office in Boston, finishing the final report on the Vance kidnapping. The 2 deceased kidnappers had been identified as known mercenaries, with ties to international organized crime. The digital trail for the ransom had gone cold, the Bitcoin vanishing into the labyrinth of the dark web. It was a clean, professional operation, with loose ends neatly trimmed. They would likely never know who hired the team. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Agent Rostova. There are no words. The debt I owe you is beyond repayment. If you ever need anything at all, the resources of the Vance family are at your disposal. A. V." Eva smiled slightly and deleted the message. She didn't do this for gratitude or for favors from billionaires. She did it for the moment a father got to hold his son again. She did it for the silence after the storm. A silence that was no longer terrifying, but peaceful. She closed the file on Leo Vance and picked up the next one. The world, after all, was full of monsters. But for today, in one small corner of it, the monsters had lost.